on my website, which you've already mentioned kindly, David at Information, there is quite a lot on Kelly actually. I think it's in fact under a separate heading. But I've spent, I suppose, literally thousands of hours on it, because our state, the British state, is in trouble. There is untruth all round. So much is veiled. People are speaking lies, and this is not the way we're brought up. I was brought up to consider that a lie was a cardinal sin, and I feel that very strongly. So there we are. So that's. But I would say that he's had an inquest. He hasn't had an inquest actually. He's had no inquest. The inquest was adjourned to the Halpin inquiry, and the Halpin inquiry, extraordinary. The Halpin was. This is of little interest. Halpin was charged with examining the circumstances surrounding the death of Dr. David Kelly. Surrounding the death of the circumstances. This isn't who killed him or how he died. You see, it's somewhat, I wouldn't say it's nebulous, but it is not what an inquest. An inquest, in fact, is that how does man die? And if he died by foul play, then in fact it's taken over by the police, you see.
Yeah.
So the Halpin inquiry wasn't even charged in the proper manner. But he ended up giving a verdict. You see, this is what. So he assumed a duty which in fact wasn't given to him, and they didn't call the court. I'll tell you, there's just two things which have some interest. Well, lots of things of interest, but the knife, which was said to be not sharp, and which had a concave blade, it was a pruning knife, made by Sandvik, the Swedish company, which he'd had for years. But you couldn't choose a worse knife for incising skin and tendons and artery. It cut a little piddly artery called the ulnar artery. As I said, it was matchstick size. When you cut an artery, it clamps down pretty quickly, particularly if you use a blunt knife.
Yeah.
And you also get clotting apart from spasm. So to think that he could have lost about 5 pints of blood through this artery is just not on it. So the primary cause of death was given by the pathologist and then retailed by Halpin. The Freedom of Information Act, which we have, two people have used that. One was Norman Baker, the MP, who's written a book about Kelly, he established that there were no fingerprints on the knife. This wasn't exposed at the Halpin inquiry, and the police withheld that evidence. It is crucial, as you can imagine.
Yes.
There's no way that a suicide can remove the fingerprints from the knife that is used to cut his throat or whatever. That's one thing. The second thing was that they got a journalist who's gone very quietly, who's been had pressure put on him, Garrick Older. He established from the police again that there was a search helicopter flew over the wood where the body was found that morning, before it was in the early hours of the morning, in fact at 2:30 in the morning, and there was no infrared image of the body at 2:30 in the morning. So there are two very important pieces of information which were withheld from the inquiry, which you would have thought would have been a good reason to reopen the inquest, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Hasn't happened.
And what would you say would be the primary cause for taking out David Kelly? Would that be because of his background in regards to his? He was a weapons expert, right? And he was looking into the whole weapons of mass destruction question, and probably would have exposed that at an early stage. This has now later on, of course, been drawn out in the media, and many people now understand that this was a big lie, but he was ahead of his time, so to speak, right? And that's why he probably was taken out as well. What do you think?
I don't know. I think it's likely he was assassinated on the basis of on the medical evidence, and on the fact that there's been so much obfuscation, so much has not been exposed. But he was in fact a germ warfare specialist, and he debriefed the Russians, it is said, when after Perestroika. But he was he'd been to many. He'd been involved in quite a few investigations and given advice. He'd given advice to Israelis actually on how much medium they would require for. I think it was for Iran actually to produce a germ warfare. He was also involved, as you say, with Iraq, and he'd been there 37 times. And in the week that he was found, on the day that he was, I'm not sure it was the day that he went missing, that he left the house and never to come back, but he was planning to return to Iraq in about 3 or 4 days with his right-hand man. And he was looking forward to it, apparently. And I think he had some affection for the Iraqi people. There's some evidence to that. But he was also, he knew something about there was a relationship between the Israelis and the South Africans in their germ warfare. And there was at one time some attempt, I think, at researching nuclear weapons too in South Africa. So there was some, I think that's maybe in Mr. Norman Baker's book. But I'm not sure about all that sort of stuff is outside.
Yeah.
What I'm mostly concerned about is what is the likely lie, that is, that this man took his life.
Right.
And as a thing that I've said quite often, I quite like words. And the little phrase I've used, that I said that he knew all about the biology of death. He knew what could kill people. He was in charge of Port and Down, which is one of the research germ warfare on the Salisbury Plain. Went there actually as a sixth former. But he was there for 10 years in charge and seconded there. So, and there they do all sorts of revolting experiments on mammals, sheep and all sorts of things. And I can tell you that they know exactly how to kill an animal. So the idea that this top germ warfare expert takes a Sandvik pruning knife and some, allegedly, his wife's coproximal tablets is not easily believed, is not to be believed easily.
That's right. And I mean, there's so many, as you say, you have written yourself about this, and again, there's so many other people that have written about this, and people can even go into the Wikipedia thread and get a whole chunk of a good piece of the story here, so to speak, in regards to how the inconsistencies in his death and how this has been taken care of, and how this has been treated subsequently after his death, of course. And again, the main thing, as you point out here, is just that the information that we have been given about him does not hold up, and therefore we automatically, of course, think that something is wrong, and this is being done for a reason. And the question is who is responsible, of course, and for what reason is that? But
we know, Henry, to butt in, what I think is, we discussed this quite a bit. I think it's so blatant, the holes in this explanation. You have a feeling they're almost testing us. Do you understand that?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you.
And of course, 9/11 is the same.
Yeah.
And the same, in fact, actually, particularly the case with 7/7, as it's called. The appearance of this fellow Peter Parr. It's almost like some sort of nightmare. The fellow appears and tells us that he was carrying out an exercise, security exercise with 1,500 people or something.
Yeah.
At the same stations, which had them. You think it's surreal, isn't it?
Very surreal. What is the reason for this? Is this, as you say, I almost say as a kind of a test? Are people reacting to this? Are they even aware of what's going on? Because it's on one level we can see that they do blatant mistakes, as it were, but in some sense that it's almost like it's egging on people, like, look at the evidence, look at this, because there's more to the story, and if people just scratch the surface, the whole thing's open up, and the idea of coincidence fall away pretty quickly. Actually, if you look at the odds of let's say the drills and that took place during 7/7 in London, and the bombings taking place at the same place at the same locations, it's just incredible.
Yeah. Well, I think I've heard some people say, of course, that it's a way of telling you and me that we can't win, because most people take the bait But of course, a lot of people don't understand that the New York population, about half of them, are sceptical about the official explanation to 9/11.
Yeah.
I'm told.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's true or not, but it is of great interest to me how many of these things, in fact, quite odd. Well, have great question marks over them, to be properly said, and how you get no further investigating those, and how it seems to be almost testing the vigor of our resistance or our dissent, testing dissent. And of course, quite often, in fact, they show through their media that they can usually, in fact, dominate the story.
Absolutely. Well, it's I'm glad that people like you, David, are around who can follow along and are smart enough to know what's going on in that sense, or at least ask the right questions in order to spawn some of the answers that we're seeking here. And I want to round things up here, David, for this time, this hour here, and talk just briefly about your appearance at the AV2 conference again. What will you primarily go into during your talk there? Do you know at this point?
Well, I did. I have a feeling it's drifting slightly, but I thought the most important thing to talk about was what flaws, what virtues in personality allow people to become leaders, and in various ways how people support them, how they get there, and how they stay there. Because my view is that most of the leaders, certain leaders we have in this country, for some years back, are psychopaths.
Yes.
I can define that as people who have an abnormal response to the loss or suffering of others.
Mm.
So I don't think that Blair, for instance, actually, if you look at a very important website that we set up called Blair War Crimes Foundation, there's a picture that I put on. A good friend set it up. There's a boy called Ali whose upper limbs were incinerated by what I think was a nuclear weapon near Basra, near Baghdad. And his mum and dad and 10 other relatives were incinerated that same night. Ali survived. There's a lot of publicity about him. But if I was to show that photograph to Mr. Blair, when I look at him, I look at this boy looking at me, and it's a wonderful photograph of his face. And I think, Mr. Blair, the war you started on a pack of lies, on pretext, has caused this one child to lose his arms. What do you think about that? I don't think you'd have the same reaction as me, even though I had no part. In fact, I opposed the war vehemently. But this is what I'm trying to say, in fact. These people carry out these vile plans. They're not plans, they're sort of mafia things. And they do not respond as ordinary humans to the suffering and loss. So I'm going to talk about that. And I've done it a bit already, actually, down here in Totnes. But I'd like to develop that a bit. In fact, I've developed it a lot.
Yes. Well,
all right. Does it sound boring?
No, absolutely not. It sounds very, very interesting because again, this is
it's crucial. I think
it is very much so because again, I think that has to do with how people deal with the leaders as well. Because again, they're projecting their own goodness upon these so-called leaders or misleaders, I would say.
Exactly.
And they do not have. Well, we are naive in that sense, and we think that they're going to treat other people the same way that we treat them, and that's a fallacy. That's a misnomer. So it's very, very important to try to get to the root of this and try to figure that out. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing your presentation there, David. And again, I can just mention for people who are interested, go to avii.co.uk. That's the website for the Alternative View Conference here coming up in London at the end of May. So go there, take a look, check out some of the speakers, times, dates, and so forth. And I also want you, David, to mention a few of your websites again for us, so people want to find out more about you and your work can do that.
Well, now you mean? Now?
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Well, there's one actually, which is, I'm afraid, some are silent because it's so much, not enough time. One is, in fact, boycott the Israeli Medical Association, boycott IMA,
yes.
Called. There's some, it hasn't been updated for some time. You mentioned the one that I put my pieces, which mostly get onto websites, occasionally into newspapers. You have the Dove and Dolphin one about the charity, which I wish to separate from most of what we've spoken about today. And there's another one which it's just come back to me. It's all silent because we can't act in Gaza, but in fact it's the Ibn Zur, IBNZUHR, Ibn Zur Medical Forum. And I set it up about 4 or 5 months ago so that doctors in Gaza could, and in Palestine generally, could contact each other, put up notices of meetings, and we'd expand it. But essentially it was to allow people to connect more easily. But Ibn Zur was a great surgeon physician in that golden period of Islam, in Arabic, in medicine. And I chose this name so it would honor my sisters and brothers in Palestine. And what's rather nice about it, I've exposed I said what is in my heart about Gaza and medicine, and that might interest people. And there's one other, but I forgot. I know, The Wall, but that's also quite quiet about the abomination we were speaking about, and that had a lot to do with legal action that I was helping to fund in regard to Israeli war criminals. And we were at the same time also tackling the legal aspects of the wall. But that fell silent because we could not, we'll leave it. It was a question of funding, partly, massive funding required.
Okay, well, but there's still good information up on these website for people to check out.
Yes, there is. It's factual stuff. Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
It's very factual.
Yeah, very good. I'm going to have these linked up on redicecreations.com. Is there anything else, David, that you'd like to leave us with?
I just heard that Jack Russell has just arrived back. So you'll hear some yapping in the background.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you very much, David, for your time today. I'm really looking forward to seeing your presentation in London. But until that time, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll talk more soon.
Thank you, Henrik, very much.
That's our program with David Halpin. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back on Thursday with more radio. In the meantime, follow along our website, redicecreations.com. Take good care, and we will talk more soon. Bye-bye.
Can't stop what's coming up. You're never gonna stop. We're gonna